There is only one place to start, and it's as follows. It is in Ann Arbor, Michigan. The Michigan Wolverines, they actually opened as a 5-point favorite, down to 3.5 points in the DraftKings Sportsbook. This is as of Monday night. Who knows where it'll be by Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday when you listen to this show. The over-under set at 46.5. When I look at this game, first thing that stands out, the great part about getting to this time of the year, you don't need me to tell you who these teams are and what they're about. We've all watched Michigan. We've all watched Ohio State. We know their strengths and weaknesses. And from the Michigan perspective, we know not only what's at stake, but everything they've gone through over the last couple of weeks, right? You don't need me to tell you about Connor Steins. You don't need me to tell you about the 3-game suspension by the Big Ten, the decision by Michigan not to fight it last Thursday, and of course, the firing of a linebackers coach, Chris Partridge, on Friday. You also don't need me to tell you that they barely survived against the University of Maryland on Saturday at Maryland. And so when I look at this game, a couple things stand out. One, they got off to that great start against Maryland, played really well. They jumped out 23-3. And then it just felt like they were holding on for dear life the rest of the game. Offense kind of sputtered. J.J. McCarthy wasn't great. Run game was not great. And so you look at Michigan coming in, and I don't think anyone would argue that they are playing their best football at this point. And as a matter of fact, I think you can argue, the offense is actually a little bit of a concern coming into this game. Just going back to last week, as I said, J.J. McCarthy, I would argue maybe played his worst game as a quarterback at Michigan on Saturday against Maryland. Now, he had a bad game against Bowling Green earlier this year. But at the same time, here is the final stat line for J.J. McCarthy. 12 of 23 passing, 141 yards, 1 interception. And that is against a Maryland pass defense that bluntly is not very good, okay? We aren't talking about the Legion of Boom here. Nobody's calling the Maryland pass defense the Legion of Boom here. And Michigan struggled to move the ball against that team. They're probably about a middle third of the country kind of pass defense from Maryland's perspective. But the other thing with Michigan that I don't think enough people are talking about, not only coming into this game, but over the course of the season, is that Michigan has really struggled to run the ball this year in ways that they haven't in the past. Last week against Maryland, they finished with 150 rushing yards, which doesn't sound bad. It was on 45 attempts, about 3 yards per carry. And I looked it up just to see, is it as bad as I think it is? They currently rank 50th nationally in rush yardage. That is insane when you consider that last year they finished 5th nationally in rush yardage. And then, of course, the year before in 2021, when they won the Big Ten for the first time under Jim Harbaugh, they finished 15th. So 15th, then peaked at number 5, and then now back down to 50th this year. A little bit of a positive note, however, coming into this game. They were without their starting left tackle, Ladarius Henderson, last week against Maryland. Also, his backup, Miles Hinton, who started in his place, he got hurt during the game. On Monday, Sharon Moore did say he expects both of them to play, as the same with Roman Wilson, the starting wide receiver. He kind of took a big hit early in the game. It was clear that they were kind of, being precautious with him. Jenny Taft said during the game there was no reason for concern, but it was extra precaution. So he gets pulled. All 3 are expected back. From the Ohio State perspective, it's interesting because I was thinking about this. Michigan, we really kind of learned a lot about them starting with the Penn State game. Like the first 8 games of the season were just whatever. And now with Ohio State, it's kind of the opposite. Everything led up to the Penn State game. Notre Dame, a couple other games, whatever. And then they beat Penn State, and they've largely, as much as Ohio State can be, they've been off the radar the last couple of weeks, haven't they? You think about Ohio State over the last couple of weeks. Here are their last 4 games since they played Michigan. Last 4 games, excuse me. Since they played Penn State, okay? They played at Rutgers. They played at Wisconsin. They played Michigan State at home. They played Minnesota at home. And now they enter this game off of those 4 games. So they haven't really had all that much to really like it's not really, it's hard for us to kind of figure out like, okay, who are they and what are they about? Play a 6-5 Rutgers team, 6-5 Wisconsin team that was playing their backup quarterback, Braden Locke, at that point. You play a bad Michigan State team, 4-7. You play Minnesota last week, which is 5-6. Just not the best competition. I do think there are some positives for Ohio State coming into this game. One, they're just getting healthy, right? Like it's not often teams get healthier as the season goes on. But remember back to that Penn State game. No Emeka Egbuka, no Travion Henderson. A couple defensive players were out. Well, one, Emeka Egbuka is back. He was actually their leading receiver last week against Minnesota, not Marvin Harrison. TreVeyon Henderson. I don't think people realize how good TreVeyon Henderson has been this year, okay? So the last 5 games that TreVeyon Henderson has played in which he is essentially healthy, this is what TreVeyon Henderson has done, okay? Last week against Minnesota, 15 carries, 146 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's about 10 yards per carry. Week before, 13 carries for 63 yards, 1 touchdown, 22 carries for 128 yards against Rutgers. We had 24 carries for 162 yards against Wisconsin. That's 7 yards per carry. And then 7 yards per carry against Notre Dame when he rushed for 104 yards on 14 carries. And so I look at this Ohio State team. They are starting to get healthy at a time of year when most people aren't. And so when I break down this game, I think it's interesting. I think it's interesting because the discourse is already starting. But what is interesting to me is as follows. Is it does feel like Ohio State slowly, I always say it's like the Plinko machine on Price is Right, the yodeler, not Plinko, the yodeler, whatever that guy is that goes up the mountain, okay? And then Michigan, it feels like at best they've kind of flatlined over the last couple weeks, and at worst they're regressing without Jim Harbaugh. And so I think the natural inclination is to say that I think a lot of people like Ohio State. The money is coming in on Ohio State. I'm here to tell you, I'm not one of those people, and I'm picking Michigan to win outright, although I will say my best bet is the under. In terms of why I like Michigan to win, a couple things. One, first off, let's get one thing straight. I keep hearing J.J. McCarthy. I don't trust J.J. McCarthy, okay? And if that's how you feel, that's fine. There is no doubt. There are all sorts of numbers that back up that he has not been the same player with Jim Harbaugh without Jim Harbaugh on the sidelines with him. Jim Harbaugh doesn't call plays. He's not the quarterback's coach, but there is clearly a level of comfort with Jim Harbaugh that is not there when Jim Harbaugh is not there. I will not deny you that J.J. McCarthy has not been the same player without Jim Harbaugh. But here's my question for everybody that says they don't trust J.J. McCarthy. Does that mean that inherently you do trust Kyle McCord? Because with due respect to Kyle McCord, listen, this isn't tear down a 19-year-old kid, 20-year-old kid that's trying to figure himself out. But Kyle McCord, it's not as though Kyle McCord is lighting things up himself. And so if you want to say J.J. McCarthy has regressed, that's fine. But here's my question. Has Kyle McCord gotten better over the course of the season? Because I'm not sure that he has. Even against Minnesota, 20 of 30 passing, 212 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's a solid, fine performance. It's not C.J. Stroud. It's not Justin Fields. It's not the late Dwayne Haskins. Like, he's fine. He's okay. By the way, at Wisconsin, 17 of 26, 226 yards. Against Rutgers, 169 yards passing. This is the guy that is going to go into Michigan and just completely outduel J.J. McCarthy. I'm not saying J.J. McCarthy is good, but are we sure Kyle McCord is? And that's not a disrespect. That's not a disrespect. What I am just saying is the focus is so much on J.J. McCarthy that I don't think enough focus is on the other quarterback as well. By the way, that's why I picked Michigan to beat Penn State a few weeks ago. I said, I don't care if Jim Harbaugh's there. I've seen Drew Aller in a big game. Drew Aller, I don't trust against an elite defense. So that's one. Two, I do think we're underselling kind of the emotional roller coaster that Michigan has been on over the last couple of weeks, okay? Because remember, the Penn State game was all emotion, right? It was flying to the game. You don't know if Jim Harbaugh is there. Then you're waiting in the hotel, trying to figure out, are you going to get that injunction? We didn't get official word that Jim Harbaugh would definitely not be coaching that game until a few hours before kickoff, okay? So you have the emotion in that game. This past week, it was the exact opposite. It was really, really, really quiet. You hear nothing out of Michigan. They find out about 36, 48 hours before that Harbaugh will not be there. And you kind of just have time to take it all in. There is no emotion. There are no highs. There are no lows. But then you get up big. You let your foot off the gas. I'm not saying that they played well, but I do think they let their foot off the gas. It was a trap game. Joel Klatt and Gus Johnson and Jenny talked about it during the game. It was a trap game. Emotion of Penn State, emotion of Ohio State, Maryland in the middle on the road. By the way, Maryland plays everybody tough. Remember, Michigan barely beat Maryland at home last year. Ohio State, people forget this. The week before the Michigan game, Ohio State, they have the ball, or Maryland has the ball with like 2 minutes to go and the chance to drive the length of the field to score, to take the lead and win the game. Talia Tagovailoa, strip sacked, return for a score. Ohio State ends up winning by 13. But they always play these teams tough. The talent gap, relatively speaking, is not that big. I'm not saying it's the same as Ohio State, but from like Ohio State to Purdue or Ohio State to Minnesota or Michigan to Illinois, there's a much bigger gap than Michigan and Ohio State to Maryland, and Maryland plays those teams tough. Finally, let me just say this, and this is all psychoanalysis, and I'm not going to try to claim that I'm an expert in this category. But I said before the Penn State Michigan game, one of the other reasons I like Michigan, I said teams take after the energy of their coaches. Okay. Jim Harbaugh, did you see what he said in his Monday press conference about his team in the locker room? Somebody asked him about the locker room, the energy, the vibe, whatever. His response, did you see this? This is a direct quote. I'm not making this up. He goes, "I like my locker rooms like I like my mom's bathing suit, all in one piece." Now, let me ask you a question. That's an incredible quote. Does that sound like a guy that is going to be nervous during this week? And do you think that is a guy that is going to put nervous energy into his team? I don't see it, especially at home. Ryan Day, will see. I'm trying to be fair. I think he's done a great job with this group this year. But this is a guy, remember, it's about 5-6 weeks ago. He was hearing the noise. He was hearing Lou Holtz. He's I mean, imagine winning one of the biggest games of your career at Notre Dame. And the first thing you think of is to crush Lou Holtz. I didn't like that. And to me, that's what I believe about Ryan Day. Great coach, looks great against the Minnesotas and the Rutgers and the Michigan States. But in the big games, I think he hears the noise. And I think he knows what this fan base would be like if he ends up losing to Michigan without Jim Harbaugh. And that's, I think, part of this that's gotten lost as well. We're talking about the Michigan angle of things. Listen, Ohio State fans are great. They've been great to me, whatever. Why I bring it up? Do you know what that Ohio State fan base would be like if they lose to Michigan again without Jim Harbaugh? And I think Ryan Day, Ohio State, I think the fans have enjoyed so much poking at Michigan that they haven't taken the time to get it's all about Michigan. And the only reason I think the perception that I have seen from the outside is that I think there's a lot of Ohio State fans that truly believe the only reason Michigan beat them the last 2 years was because of Connor Stallions, because of sign stealing, was because of cheating. And so I bring it up because imagine if they lose this game. All that goodwill from Ryan Day will be gone. I like Michigan to win. My official best bet is the under. I don't think either team breaks 24. I'm going to say 21-10 Michigan wins. I think it's low scoring. I think it's close possessions. I like Michigan to win, but the under is my best bet.